The future of music. How is music and innovation going to work together?
This is a beautiful metaphor, you know, like this is, at least it feels a little bit more linked to the plants, especially the ones from the Guarani community, because they did a ceremony each afternoon, like of renaming one plant, and then they sing a song to them. So it's like, yeah, it's as close as that can go, I feel.
سوف ترحل يوما ما لكني سأبقى.
Ich bin von der Berlin-Brandenburgischen Akademie der Wissenschaften und wir haben dort ein Jahresthema, das heißt Naturgemälde. Und das war für uns der Ausgangspunkt dieses Projekts, gemeinsam mit Deutschlandfunk Kultur und der Jungen Akademie zu initiieren. Und dann haben wir als weitere Partner noch das Botanische Museum dazu bekommen und das CTM Festival. Für uns war die Idee tatsächlich, wie kann man das Naturgemälde, das ist ein ikonografisches Bild von Alexander von Humboldt, wie kann man das übersetzen ins 21. Jahrhundert mit ästhetischen Mitteln, wie kann man da Anknüpfungspunkte dran finden, und für uns war eigentlich der Grundgedanke, kann man diesen ja erstmal sehr visuellen, bei Humboldt ist er visuell und sprachlich gefassten Begriff irgendwie hörbar machen. So sind wir auf den Botanischen Garten gekommen, weil uns das als idealer Ort erschien, in dem Pflanzen tatsächlich so angeordnet sind, dass sie selber eine Art begehbares Naturgemälde sind. Und wir wollten an diesen Ort Sound, Musik bringen und das Ganze zu einem wirklich unmittelbaren Erlebnis von Natur machen und gleichzeitig aber auch dort Kunst und Wissenschaft zusammenzubringen, weil das eben auch die Idee des Naturgemäldes ist, dass man dort einerseits hat es einen ästhetischen Zugriff, es hat so ein unmittelbares Erleben und gleichzeitig hat es aber natürlich auch einen ganz wichtigen wissenschaftlichen Impetus.
Jeon bakal angkat sentinten tapi kurang mual.
نسخة حدا معلتك يا دايخة أنا جن كهل.
So basically, I took recordings that I have made myself of the forest, for example, or other field recordings that I found from sound banks, specifically related to these areas. And what I thought it would be interesting was to have something pulsing, something that felt rhythmical, because I thought it would correspond to those songs made by Maria Thereza from the Guarani community. Also, in that process of investigating, like when I received those songs, I started to look for, just as a process of research, you know, like in Okora or in Folkways and all these catalogs that recover folk songs and community songs, and I started to look specifically for communities around the world that celebrate the forest, water, plants, fungi, and many things. And I started to find like this common ground on how those songs are made, like these shamanic ceremonial songs that always kind of have this pulsing and energy, you know. And I was thinking like, okay, I can somehow attach to that rhythmic pattern and correspond to it in a more artificial way. So this is what I did. I took samples and then I put it in a system in which I chopped the piece and I start to randomly create rhythms until I find some that I like.
Mein Name ist, also ich heiße Patrick Petzold und mache Projektmanagement und Sound und leite mit das Sound Department von usomo.
Usomo, erklär mir mal dieses System.
Genau, also das usomo-System steht für Unique Sonic Moments und unique, weil jeder, der dieses System in die Hand bekommt, auch sein eigenes Erlebnis bekommt. Ja, also jeder hat seine eigene Show, wenn er mit unserem System durchläuft. Und ja, das ist eben ein Audio, ein 3D Audiosystem, würde ich sagen auch gerne dazu Virtual Reality Audio.
But I'm happy to be here as somebody that comes from Brazil. I get a little bit of warmth and get a relationship to my body and plants back. And I liked it very much. The other day I was here, it was very dark. And I was walking, I was really into the sound. And then all of a sudden I saw one of these tubes. And I thought it was a snake. And I jumped back. I was like, oh, it's really nice because I could get a little bit into a possibility of where the place is and where I'm not the only definition of the place. And so I think opening us to the possibility that we are not the only definition of a place makes a future more interesting for us and gives us a future.
سوف ترحل يوما ما لكني سأبقى.
Anjeon bakal angkat sa tinten, tapi kurang moal.
For the use of this work, 2 or 3 songs, one that weren't specifically about one plant. One is a traditional song, and then one that is welcoming plants with singing and dancing. And then the other ones are specific ones. I think this is a beginning, that you hear their voice in the area that has plants that have a relationship specifically to that community for thousands of years, and no longer has a relationship to colonization. So it's interesting to welcome that voice there, and that's a beginning.
Một ngày nào đó, bạn sẽ đi. Một ngày nào đó, bạn sẽ đi.
Anjeon bakal angkat sa tinten, tapi kurang moal.
نسخة حدا معلتك يا دايخة آنجن.
My background, because I'm a civil engineer and I have worked in geotechnical for a while, and this is something that, like thinking about time, for example, in geology, is something that fascinates me, like how time is in this linear form is totally removed. It's like it's more working in a way of how layers and how maybe this layer from the ground suddenly could come up and change the landscape completely. So I really like this idea of working with time that is a little bit dissolving the idea of time itself. So I think this is a system that is great for that. But it also, of course, has to have some conscious decisions about how big a loop should be, because there are loops, and how those loops change over time and transform, and how they intertwine with other loops. So it was like thinking, I don't know, I guess I activated another part of my brain as a composer to think about this, to think about space more than time in composition. So that was wonderful. I really like it. Yeah.
Does it increase the experience of the concert, if you wish?
I don't know. That's also very subjective, I feel. But what I was trying to convey, if something, is this maybe opportunity that you have in such a place like this, like the forest. Because for me, for instance, like having been in the forest and stay, like for 1 hour, just standing there and listening is one of the best experiences that I've had in my life, probably. and probably one of the best concerts that I've ever encountered. And I always wonder, because you hear of all these field recordists, and I guess you don't get it until you experience it yourself, because it's so complex, it's so rich. So I was like, okay, this relates to that experience, that your position affects your specific experience that you're having in this very moment. Of course, in the jungle, in the forest, is very much complex because you can go into detail, and of course the ear is very complex also. But I think this is a nice approach to that possibility, with this system, because you can really play sounds 360. You can. So there were sounds that I was like explaining to the programmer. Okay, this needs to be heard like from above, as if you were hearing a community that you really cannot reach, but because of the echo, you hear it kind of up there, and then this bird, you have to hear it in this way. Like I started to think about possibilities, like fictions of plays, that was happening here.
There's one spoken part or one position right in the center of the whole installation where you get people to speak. What do they say?
They say the sentence, "You will go away one day, but I will not." And this is another thing I did that I felt complemented what the Guarani people did already, because in the process of renaming, the plant that is called Nymphoides humboldtiana was renamed in a Guarani name, and when we translated that was the sentence that we got. "You will go away one day, but I will not," which we thought it's absolutely wonderful that it correlates specifically to the work. And then so I thought that another way to give a chance of more voices be heard here was to record this sentence in non-colonial languages. So I have indigenous languages from America, from Mexico, from Peru, from Colombia. Then I have from Africa, Oceania, Vietnam. So these are all people saying this sentence.
I think that's problematic to decide that an indigenous culture is the past, because that is the nation state of Europe in a colonial process saying that indigenous knowledge is past and not present. And what are you then saying that Western knowledge is present and future and indigenous knowledge is the past? So that is itself a colonial setup, and I will not answer that question that way. I will say that I invited the Guarani community in the Jaguapiru reservation to participate in decolonizing their land that they are doing every day of their lives, and also in participating in a discourse with the Botanical Garden here in Berlin with the plants that from their region that have been colonized with names that are non-indigenous, and honoring people that are non-indigenous. And it is looking at the plants today, the generation of today, looking at the plants and having a dialogue with the plants and collectively deciding how are we going to talk about these plants. Because the area they're from has been deforested, so many of their plants no longer are available. This is the second or third generation that don't see the plants from their own territory. And so it was a meeting of the community to discuss, oh yes, this was the plant here. How do we look at it? How do we welcome it back? And then they would come together as a community and figure out how to look at it and name it. So it's not the past, it's so more present than Western knowledge, because they did this in the month of November. Whereas these names are from, 200 years ago? So this is Western European, old. Okay, no future.
الصغة حدا معلتك هي عدايخة. عانقن كهلي.
سوف ترحب